All right, so we've gone through the process of figuring out what each of these things are: mean, median, and mode. Again, they're different ways to measure where the middle of something is based on different criteria. But I want to talk about when to use each one and when each one is kind of the most valid measure. And when it's not as well. We talk about mean. The mean right here. One thing about the mean is the mean is likely to give unrealistic numbers. One of the statistics that you'll hear sometimes is the average household has 2.7 children. 2.7 children. Okay. Now, does it make sense that there's actually 2.7 children in somebody's house? No. Though what happened is if you get how many kids every family has, you add them all up, divide by the number, then you get a result that looks something like this. Now, 2.7 kind of tells us it's between 2 and 3. Doesn't give us a ton of information. Says there's more people who have more than 3 than have less than 2, but it doesn't give us a ton of really good information. Um, and so it can give us these inaccurate numbers, but it does still convey information. Maybe you had a race and you say, okay, the average time for this race was 1 minute and 12 seconds. But that doesn't mean anyone actually ran it in 1 minute and 12 seconds. So that's where mean can kind of be a bit strange. The other thing about mean that can happen is mean can really be thrown off if you have somebody like Bill Gates. And let's say we're looking at income and we said, hey, we're going to take the income of everyone in our class. Or not the income, but the money, how much money you have. And maybe some of you have, a couple $100. Maybe some of you only have $1 or two. But you put Bill Gates in there, and suddenly the average person in the room has somewhere around $3 million. That's the mean. Now, is that a good representation of how much money you have? No, it's basically one person throwing the mean way, way off. So those are some examples where mean doesn't fit in really well. But then we go back to the idea of the race, and you want to know kind of what a average normal time is in order to do, to be competitive in a race. That average can give you the time that is a decent time that's kind of around what people ran in a particular race, as opposed to other results. Now, the median, let's go back to the Bill Gates example. The median, the disadvantage of this is that it would totally ignore that Bill Gates is the room. It would just say, hey, there's one person with a bunch of money, but we're just going to find that middle person, and the middle person in the room might have, whatever, $75, because some people have more than 100, some people have less, and you go, okay, average person in here, the median person has $75. But it totally ignores the fact that you have someone who's really, really, really wealthy in the room. So the median cuts out a lot of data that otherwise might be important. So we don't want to ignore that data all the time. But if we were trying to get the most average picture of, okay, what does it look like in the room, our $3 million probably wouldn't be the most average representation. And finding that, okay, average amount of net worth people have $75. Um, the mode is something that's really useful because it actually tells the story that most people are experiencing. And so it was what actually happened the most times, which can be a very important piece of data, especially if you have something where you have a bunch of data in one area, but then you have a bunch that kind of trails out in different directions. Both the mean and the median can kind of get stretched by that, but you see the idea of what actually most people experienced. Imagine a test that was given that might have a mean grade, where if you average everything, you get a C. It had a median grade of a B and a mode of a B plus, where more people got a B plus than anything else, right? So mode can actually be really useful because it can just tell a very different story and say, well, what result did most people experience? Now, one of the issues with mode mostly comes in when you have a large amount of data. If you have a large amount of data, then finding things that line up perfectly can be really tough. Let's say we were looking at how old you were, right? How old the average sixth grader is. Well, that would be something that's easy to get a mode of if we were doing it by years. But if we were doing it by days, basically all we'd be asking is what day do the most people have their birthday on? What, and it would kind of end up being random. We might have 75 students and 2 or 3 of them happen to share a birthday, and that would become our mode, and it wouldn't really be representative of anything else that's going on. Meanwhile, if we did it by year, we would get an idea. Well, our most sixth graders 11 or 12, because people are probably going to be 11 or 12. Somewhere between 10 and 13 is the most likely age you're going to see there. So in those cases, when you get really specific data, the mode isn't as valuable. And when you have a lot of it, like if you took every family in the United States and how much money they had, well, someone might have 12 cents more than another. A lot of times mode is actually looked at differently, where rather than just saying, okay, how many people have 5, how many people have 6, they'll create bands where they say, okay, 0 to 10, how many people are in the 0 to 10 area, and then how many people are in the 10 to 20 area. Let's see, 0 to 10 and 10 to 20 and 20 to 30, or 21 to 30 and 11 to 21. But they kind of break it up that way so that you can kind of group things together, because in cases like this, maybe 15 and 16 are close enough that it's not a big deal, so they want to kind of get groups together overall. So this is just to give you an example of kind of when these are the appropriate things to use, and to be aware of some of the faults of them. Mean oftentimes gives an answer that can't actually exist, and so it just kind of is a numerical representation. Median really ignores anyone on the really high or the really low extremities, and instead just says, okay, what's kind of about the middle person? Take 100 people and it's whatever person 50 experiences. And then the mode is just kind of are the most people experiencing. More people experience this one thing than anything else, or more, this result came in more times than anything else.